I'm Rhett Lewis, and this is NFL Inside Report. It's draft week, and two teams have an opportunity to be power players within the top 10 of this year's NFL draft. Talking about the New York Jets and the New York Giants, two of the 8 teams with multiple first-round draft picks, but both the Jets and the Giants with those 2 first-rounders within the top 10 of this year's draft. And safe to say that they have earned those selections, especially over the course of the last few years. And that's what we're diving into today with Judy Battista, who's going to join us here on the state of frustration in what she calls the Gotham area gridiron. A fantastic word choice there. And Judy is with us here on today's episode to detail the futility here that the Giants and Jets have found themselves in, and then how this draft could help them climb their way out of this hole. Judy, great to be back here with you.
Great to be here. I wish it were under, better circumstances for
Sure.
the teams, but whatever, we'll take it.
Yes, for Judy's home teams. Come on. So Judy, you and I were just chatting a bit before we started here. And, in the piece, you talk about the Giants haven't been in the playoffs in 5 years. Jets, it's been longer, right? Since 2010, over a decade now since the Jets last found themselves into the postseason. And look, when you combine the 2 records of the teams that share MetLife Stadium, it's not pretty. How would you describe kind of your unearthing of some of this this lack of winning over these last few years for these teams?
So when our editors asked me to maybe for the draft, why don't you look at the 2 New York teams, because they have, they each have 2 first-round draft picks. I turned to our fantastic research department and I said,
sure,
can you give me any context on just how bad they are? And they within 45 seconds, they shot back this email with,
and that one
they share the worst record in the NFL over the last 5 years, which I had not realized. And I was like, oh my God, that's even worse than I thought it was. It's really bad. Look, just from somebody who lives in New York, I know that the teams are not relevant past November, and that's late. Our friend and colleague Peter Schrager was talking about it on Good Morning Football this morning, and he said they never get to talk about the Jets and Giants on Good Morning Football after the first month of the season because they're not relevant. They're not playing meaningful games. It's bad, it's been a long series of missteps by both teams. But obviously this draft presents a rare opportunity for both teams to flip it pretty quickly.
Yeah, they are front and center, though, of all of the draft conversation here. And, depending on how you look at it, that's not necessarily a great thing unless you use that capital for good. And that is obviously what both teams are trying to do here as they embark on this draft, which we'll get to here in just a couple of days. But before we get back into that, and let's just, because you did a great job of kind of painting the picture of how New Yorkers feel about their teams. And some of them have, in fact, taken to the skies to voice their displeasure, Judy, for both teams.
Yeah, so back in the 70s, this is something that happened with the Giants that John Mara, the owner of the Giants, still references. It was when his father was still alive and still on the team. But fans were so disgusted with how the Giants were at that point that they rented a banner plane and, flew it overhead and, 15 years, we've had enough. And the good news for the Giants is after that, they started making changes. And a few years later, they were in the playoffs. They hired George Young as the general manager, which is really the decision that led to everything good that has happened for the New York Giants since then. And in a strange echo of it, a few years ago at the Jets practice facility during practice one day, a plane flew overhead calling for the firing of then general manager John Itzik. And that was a really strange scene because literally the team was out there getting ready to practice and, the team officials were looking up in the sky at this banner plane that sort of circled Florham Park a few times. So, fans are frustrated and just sort of, disbelieving. And again, it's not even that they're bad, it's that they're irrelevant. That's the really bad part.
Right. It's not like you're fighting, towards the end and like, yeah, you just fall
No,
short in week 18 for the seventh and final playoff spot in the conference. We're not even
no.
there. I mean, the season had ended 4 weeks prior for both of these teams. It felt like,
Listen, when Joe Douglas said at the combine, not at the combine, it was at the league meeting a few weeks ago when he said, I think we should be playing meaningful games in December. And I know some people rolled their eyes because it's like, well, that's not a very high bar. And it's like, well, that would be real progress
actually,
for either of these
yeah.
teams to be playing a meaningful game into December. So, they'll take that. That would be good.
And you talk about not being able to pinpoint one area or one moment where this all started to go terribly awry. I mean, like, look, you got to go back. When you talk about the Jets last making the playoffs, we're talking about Rex Ryan as the head coach, and think about how far. I mean, he's been out of the league, for a while now. So to think about that, and then for the Giants, obviously I haven't been in the playoffs without Eli Manning, and so that's a part of it too. Turnover at franchise quarterback. Inability to find one for the Jets, is part of this thing too, right?
Yeah, I talked to Boomer Esiason, the former Jets and Bengals quarterback, who is now a very, very popular sports talk radio host here
Right.
in New York. And so he hears it from both fan bases. And he said, like, you can't put your finger on just one thing. He said, Jets fans tend to blame ownership and Giants fans want to pin everything on Dave Gettleman. But it obviously goes much further than that.
Yeah.
When the bottom falls out, it's not just one reason. There's much more. Certainly you're right. Like the Giants, obviously, the post Eli Manning era has not been good. But also, I mean, they have turned over coaches every 2 years now. That's extremely un-Giants-like, right? This is one of the most stable franchises that values stability and continuity. So that is very out of character for them.
Right.
They felt it's been needed. They've had some underperforming draft picks. Obviously, I think we can say that the hiring of Dave Gettleman was probably a mistake at general manager. Things just haven't worked. Recent decisions, and the Jets, same thing. Bad draft picks, bad coaching fits, bad general manager hires. Yeah. I thought it was remarkable how the same factors were contributing to both teams. I mean, the Giants has had more recent high-level success. They've won 2 Super Bowls.
Right.
But the missteps were similar for both teams.
Yeah. And look, you mentioned the hiring of George Young as the piece that turned around that struggling Giants franchise at the time, and now won, 4 Super Bowls since then. And now they have another new general manager in Joe Shane. How does he carve his path for success, kind of starting on Thursday?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wouldn't want to put it on Joe Shane to try to live up to what George Young did, because that is a high bar to reach. So I don't want to do that to Joe Shane. But look, he has already, I think, started to carve his own path in this offseason. I mean, he inherited a really bad salary cap situation, and he was pretty honest that that was going to be what had to happen this offseason. They had to clean that up. He had to cut, he said at the time, $40 million in payroll. So I think he's already started doing that. They've had a modest free agency spending period where they made some improvements to the offensive line, but certainly whatever he does starting Thursday is going to have the biggest immediate impact. And with 2 such high draft picks, I think the question is, if you get 2 blue chip players, right, they have to be plug and play guys who make an immediate impact.
Right.
Or does he go and try to trade out of one of those picks and pick up a lot more ammunition, which they could use now? And they could also use potentially next year if they pick up an extra first rounder next year, when they could be in the market for a quarterback if Daniel Jones does not pan out the way everybody hopes he does.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line that they're towing here, because you want to, as when John Mara said we've tried everything we can to screw this kid up, a few months ago after the season, you're like, okay, yeah, well, let's give him a real shot, right? And certainly feel like Brian Daboll coming in as the head coach is type of coach and offensive mind, like we saw work wonders in Buffalo with Josh Allen, that could help bring Daniel Jones along. But you've also, if that's the case, if you want to get a true evaluation, you are using this draft to support him in a big way, right? And so and then to also think about, well, what if we're able to plan for the future, by moving out of one of these picks? So you're supporting maybe a little bit less, but also kind of on the back end hedging your bets. So it does feel like a kind of a fine line for them to toe, especially if they truly want to get that, this year of evaluation for Daniel Jones and then make a decision, right, Judy?
Well, you keep hearing teams use the phrase like competitive rebuild, and that's sort of what they're talking about at the Giants, right? They don't want to bottom out,
right?
But they want to be competitive. But they're clearly retooling the roster, and they have to retool the roster, and they have to, especially on the offensive line, which has been a shambles for years. And that, I think, more than anything, if they can just get the offensive line to be decent, that would help Daniel Jones. It would help Saquon Barkley, who's another player that they're going to have to evaluate this year. But I do think they feel like you've got to do your best to put pieces around Daniel Jones to help him be successful, not just for Daniel Jones' own sake, but for the franchise's sake.
Sure.
You've got to find out if this first-round quarterback is what you thought he wasn't, and they have not done enough to give him the opportunity to show that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then, looking at, obviously Andrew Thomas, top 5 pick a couple of years ago at left tackle, feel pretty good about the way that's trending there. So you're hoping, maybe at 5 or 7, you get one of the top 2 tackles in this draft, put him over on the right side. And now you've at least solidified, or you hope you've at least solidified both of the tackle spots there. And then, with the other pick, maybe you're left to get the best defensive player on the board, whichever way that is.
It would be great if they get one of the good edge rushers. I mean, the good news for the Giants, if you want to look at this on the bright side, is their needs dovetail nicely with the strengths of this draft.
Right.
They need offense. They need an offensive tackle, and they need an edge rusher
and a corner.
And
you can get that too. Yeah. Depending on when James Bradbury makes his exit. Yeah.
Right. So the good news is they do have a good field to pick from.
Yeah, and then then we've got high-level picks at the top of the second and third rounds too. So that the draft doesn't end in the top 10, although it's a big piece of this thing. And they will definitely be a power player on April 28th when we kick off the 2022 NFL Draft live from Las Vegas. And from everybody just listening to us today, just a reminder that a copy of Judy's story you can find NFL.com/Big Apple Draft, restoring football in the Big Apple. Again, NFL.com/Big Apple Draft there. And so that's kind of a piece on why we got here for the Jets and the Giants. Look at how the Giants try to climb themselves out. And now let's take a look at the Jets' path forward here. We'll do that right after this quick break. All right, back here with Judy Battista on this episode of NFL Inside Report. A reminder that Judy's piece right now on the state of football in the New York area, out right now, NFL.com/Big Apple Draft, as the Jets and the Giants, 2 of the 8 teams with multiple first-round draft picks, both of those teams with those 2 first-rounders in the top 10. For the Jets, they sit at 4 and 10. But let's take another look back here a little bit on how we got here for the Jets, where the owner, Woody Johnson, as you talk about in the story here, reads comments on social media.
I know, he's crazy.
Brave, also, I would say, right? Yeah. I mean, it strikes you as like, usually, maybe that's something that, in a position of ownership, you might try to leave that stuff alone, right? But he's into it.
Well, he's really into social media anyway, but I was surprised when he said he reads the comments and he sort of said, like, laughing, he said, look, I've been doing this 20 years. Like, I feel their pain. He's heard it all before. So he understands the frustration of Jets fans. He's one of them. I think if you could point to one thing about the Jets, it's the complete inability to land a franchise quarterback. I mean, they've tried repeatedly, and it just hasn't worked. And, I thought it looked good for a while there with Mark Sanchez. Don't forget they made the AFC Championship game in back-to-back years with Mark Sanchez. Now, that was a defensive-dominated team, but still, it's the AFC Championship game. And then the wheels have been spinning ever since. And then I agree with Boomer Esiason that when they acquired Tim Tebow, that is when I felt like things were really sort of careening off. Like, where are we headed here? So
right.
But I do think this current brain trust seems to be on the same page with each other, and that is, as Woody Johnson himself pointed out, that has not always been the case. So that's a step forward.
Sure. Sure, and it does. Yeah, like I said, it feels like the coach and GM are in lockstep, and they're also, united together to try to get, try to make Zach Wilson work as the franchise quarterback. And I think there have been some signs of progress on that front, and now it's continuing to build around him, and that's part of what they're going to do here, and that's part of what they were trying to do, Judy, earlier this offseason, when they probably felt like they had a pretty good shot to get Tyreek Hill, and were offered a good deal and a nice compensation package for the Chiefs. Tyreek opted to go to Miami. So if we ever thought that the Jets were going to be in the wide receiver market in the top 10 of this draft, the fact that they went out and tried to get one of the best in the league and couldn't get it done certainly makes it feel like that's a place they could go in this draft if another marquee wide receiver doesn't come available, like let's say Deebo Samuel or AJ Brown or someone else, because it has happened this offseason a couple of times.
Yeah, the Jets have 4 picks in the top 40. So they have a whole lot of ammunition either to pick those 4 picks or to use some of that in a trade. Now, obviously, they've been linked with Deebo Samuel a lot. Nobody's really sure if the 49ers are interested in trading Deebo Samuel as much as he might be interested as he is in leaving. But whichever way they go, they have a lot of ammunition. And Joe Douglas said when he met with the media last week, that when you're picking in the first and second rounds, those guys should be immediate starters. So if they exercise all 4 of those picks, that's 4 starters brand new on the team. Like, you got to be able to turn the tide if you've got that many blue chip players. Combined with last year, they had 2 first-round draft picks. So that's a lot of draft capital that should be on the field. I agree with you. I thought Zach Wilson, especially late in the season, showed signs. First of all, I think he's really tough and resilient. And I thought that it seemed like things were coming to him better late in the season when he got back on the field. So that was encouraging for him. They believe in him. They do need weapons for him. I mean, a top tier receiver, whether it's in a trade or through the draft, would be a big help to him.
Yeah, certainly. And how do you feel like the organization, maybe outside of Joe Douglas, who obviously made as strong a push as he could to get Tyreek Hill, feels about not getting that done? Like, is it looked upon as, oh man, here we go, another? No.
I actually think they felt good about it. I think they felt good about being aggressive, that they had the weapons and let's be aggressive. Let's swing for the fence here. This is one of the top receivers in the league. Let's go for it. So I think they feel good about that. I think they understood the circumstances that Tyreek probably wanted to be in Miami, for personal reasons. He wanted to be in Miami, and that's fine. That's going to happen. But I think they felt good about being able to say, look, we went for it, and this is an indication that we're going to go for it. If
that's the point.
Opening, we're going to go for it. And that hasn't always been the case. And so I think that feels good, and it happens to line up with a time when they have a lot at their disposal. They've got a lot of draft picks. They had a lot of salary cap space this offseason. So they're pushing forward, and I think that's good for the Jets.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't look at it as, hey, we didn't get it done, but we made the push to actually do it. Which you could certainly look at as a step in the right direction for a player of that kind of impact, right, at that kind of position. So, and then you mentioned you have 4 picks in the top 40, and you got to get 4 starters there. They basically did that last year when you look back at Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker, and then you got Elijah Moore, top of the second round, who was banged up, but you're counting on him to be a top 3, wide receiver in your system here, which, you essentially count on as a starter. And then, Michael Carter is going to be a part of the running back rotation as well. There, depending on, where they end up going in this draft at that position. So, you think like all right, maybe did that last year. Now, how do we duplicate it, right? How do we essentially that's when you start turning rosters over, when you hit on picks like this. And, I think there's so many different places that they could go. They're kind of like the Giants. Like, they could go offensive line, they could go edge rusher, they could go corner, and those are all kind of needs, but receiver is certainly up there as well in those, especially with those first 2.
It's interesting. Joe Douglas, again, when he talked to reporters last week, quoted something Ozzie Newsome says, which is like a luxury pick now could be a necessity very soon, right? So there's no such thing as a luxury pick. He was saying you always have to take the best player available, because it may look like a luxury today, but in 3 weeks, that could be a necessity. So, look, when you're a team that has not won that many games, like you could go in almost any direction, and it's not going to be a luxury pick. You need to upgrade the roster all over the place. Another point that they've made, both Saleh and Douglas have made, is they can help Zach Wilson as much with offensive weapons, but also by improving the defense. The defense was the worst in the league last year and was near the bottom in passing defense. And their feeling is it's a lot easier for a young quarterback to operate if he doesn't wake up every Sunday morning knowing he's going to be in a shootout, knowing he's going to have to come from behind, knowing he's always going to be digging out of a hole. Like they made the point, like, look at the young quarterbacks who succeed quickly. Like they're not playing from behind all the time. So Saleh's a defensive guy. I would not be surprised to see them go heavy on defense because they know they've got to improve that defense, not just for the point of improving the defense, but because that will help Zach Wilson a lot to not have the pressure of always having to pull the team from behind.
Yeah, no question. And look, I think you mentioned what Robert Saleh has said a little bit through in your piece about the situation that they're in compared to others that we've seen around the league. Talking about Buffalo, was mired in trials and tribulation trying to find their way to the top of the AFC East, and now they've been there back-to-back years. Cincinnati, there were questions about Zach. Oh gosh, is Zach Taylor really the guy to do this? And then all of a sudden they're in the Super Bowl. But it's about finding a quarterback. It's about supporting the quarterback. Do the Jets really feel like they can be that next team to make that kind of jump?
Well, they think they've got the quarterback. Now, obviously, he hasn't done what Joe Burrow has done or what Josh Allen has done yet, but they think that they've got that guy. Now the question is, can you put enough around him and can he make the big jump? Because don't forget, in the case of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow was a little bit different because he got hurt as a rookie,
right.
But Josh Allen made that big leap. Remember, he went up to like 70% completion percentage.
Yes, and it took like 2 years.
It did.
It took slow climb. Yeah.
But that's what you're going to have to see from Zach Wilson over the next year or two is can he make the big jump and can they do enough around him to help him make that big jump? But they feel good about Zach Wilson. So in that respect, they're like a half inch ahead of the Giants. You still have to evaluate Daniel Jones. They want to give him all the chance they can, but they're not sure yet. The Jets feel pretty good about Zach Wilson.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to lay out a scenario to you that I had in the Rhett Lewis mock draft, which comes out this week here on NFL.com. One and only. I only do one mock draft. I'm like Mike Mayock in his only one.
I'm glad I don't have to do a mock draft because this year is nuts. Like I have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. And so I'm sitting there racking my brain on this thing, going 1 through 32, and then I'm listening to all these GMs have their draft press conference, and they're all like, it's a crapshoot. I'm like, well, what am I doing over here trying to? If you can't predict this thing, then what am I doing? But I was thinking about this scenario for the Jets, and tell me how plausible you think this might be. So if you're a team like the Jets who made an obvious play to go get one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in football in Tyreek Hill, couldn't do it. And if you can't go get Deebo Samuel, which by the way goes back to a position of luxury, could be a necessity. I don't think the 49ers thought they were going to be in this situation at the end of last season either. But anyway, I digress. So let me throw this out to you. They want a wide receiver badly. And it stands to reason that the way that contracts are going right now in the NFL, Judy, there's more value and more cost control in getting a high-level receiver in the draft, right, than going to sign for one, trade for one, spend $25 million a year on one. So if the Jets are sitting there at 4-10, what's to stop them from getting the number one wide receiver on their board at number 4 overall, rather than waiting until number 10 when maybe one or two of the wideouts that you had right up at the top of your positional ranking of those guys is already gone. And then you have to settle or move on in a different way. Like, I feel like a wide receiver at 4 could be a real possibility because now the Giants might be in the wide receiver market with Kadarius Toney, potentially wanting out of New York, and then the Falcons at 8. So like there are a couple of teams up there that might get, a guy that maybe the Jets had been targeting.
Sure. I don't rule anything out of this draft because we've seen the entire offseason has been unpredictable, but this draft is the most unpredictable that I can remember
Certainly.
in years. We literally don't know who's going number 1. So that's the first part of it. I agree with you. They could go receiver, except I wonder how they evaluate the receivers because it's a pretty good receiver class. So do they feel, well, you get with your first pick in the first round, you get a Sauce Gardner, for example,
Sure,
which is another real position of need for them.
right.
And then, later on at 10, if you don't trade back, that's the place where you could get a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think all of this depends on how the board falls on Thursday
It does.
night and what's in front of them when they're on the clock. Again, for the Giants and Jets both, like when you need to upgrade this many positions, there's almost no position that you could take that counts as like, what, that's a bad choice. Like,
right.
You need to upgrade everything when you're this bad.
It is. And yeah, it depends on whether we get 3 edge rushers in the first 3 picks, whether we get one of the tackles goes before the Jets are on the.
Like, we have no idea what Houston is going to do, right?
No.
So like that's another spot where you're like, that could change the whole course.
They're like the Giants and the Jets in that they could use a player at literally every position. And the Lions aren't that far off from that, although they feel pretty set at the tackle spot. So like there are a lot of variables here and a lot of moving pieces. And if you're here for the chaos and drama and intrigue, then this draft is for you. Like simply, like this is why I cannot wait for Thursday, is because I filled out a mock draft 1 through 32. I might not get one right.
Yes.
Like I might not get one projection right, Judy.
A writer friend of mine, so I don't have to do a mock draft, and I'm grateful for that. But a writer friend of mine who does have to do a mock draft was asking me the other day, like, what do you think? How should I mock the first 10 picks? And I was like, he's like, I just want to get one of these right. And I'm like, well, you might not. Like, I have no idea.
Right.
No idea. So I do think this is going to be intriguing. And look, we're not even accounting for trading out, like, which I think the Giants would like very much to do, to trade back.
Right.
Who the heck knows if that's going to happen? Or teams looking to come up? It doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like there's a rush to move up the board. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's going to be a fascinating first round, though.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand the desire to move out, but the desire to move up has to be there by someone.
Yeah, you've got to have a partner to trade with.
Right.
I'm not sure that there's a whole bunch of those out there.
Exactly. And then, the teams with multiple first round picks like the Giants and the Jets would love for quarterbacks to go early, but this isn't the year, it feels like, for that to happen, because then you get, the better positional players push their way down a little bit. So there's look, it's going to be, and here's the thing, like, here's what I'm hoping for in my mock draft. Okay. That I at least get like the majority of the right names into the 32. You know what I mean? Like if I can just get like the 32 players that go into the first 32 spots, I don't care where they end up. I'm like, all right, we essentially agree on the 32 best players in the league. So
that's fair.
Like, because the trades screw it all up.
Last year was so much easier when it was like, all right, Trevor Lawrence.
Quarterbacks, 1, 2, 3. Yep. Yeah.
Like this year is just, I'm sure it's great for Charlie Uke, our fantastic.
Oh, yes, the King of Spring.
Draft coverage. But it's mayhem trying to predict what's going to happen here. And what's even more mayhem and indicator is when you talk to people in the league, when you talk to team officials, like, they don't know what other teams are doing, right? Like, they're not getting a good read on, like, what do you think they're going to do? Like, how many quarterbacks are going to come?
Yeah.
I don't know. You don't know? How am I supposed to know?
I mean, there's, by the way, and I have these chats with Daniel Jeremiah every day during our Path to the Draft season. He's so well connected with all of these guys, and it's, he's the best in the business. And he was talking to me about conversations he's had with 2 different GMs on the same player, one of which sees said player as a first round pick, one of which has a 6th round grade on the same player.
Wow.
Think about the disparity in that, and the value and the positional value. And it's just
DJ tweeted, was it this morning, when he said if this draft had an emoji, it would be the shrug emoji.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know.
And by the way, here just to kind of bring this whole thing full circle here about the volatility of this draft and this draft class and of the state of New York football. The Buffalo Bills at pick number 25 play over in Western New York, right? And, are back-to-back AFC East champions. They're an AFC East contender. They're a popular Super Bowl pick. They could literally go anywhere with their choice at 25, but for the entirely opposite reasons that the Jets and the Giants could go anywhere.
Right.
Because
Right.
they're pretty well stacked
They don't have a need
as a roster.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. There's no need for them. Yes, which is what a sweet spot for them to be.
Right.
Like they can watch the mayhem everywhere else and just
Yeah.
sit back and be like, yeah.
We're cool. That's why we're
Yeah.
talking about like a running back going to the Bills in the first round at number
Right.
25, because
That's
why
what,
not?
that's exactly what Robert Saleh was talking about, right? Like
Yeah.
it's only a few years ago that the Bills
Right,
were in the
right.
spot. It was not that long ago, and look at how fast it flipped. Like if you hit on the right picks,
Yep.
especially the quarterback,
That's it.
It can turn.
It's so funny. This is going to be so much fun. Hope you guys are all along for the ride here. We've got the draft covered literally on every single platform out there. Digitally, on TV, on your apps, wherever you want to be. We've got it all covered. And Judy's got a great primer for you on how the New York football establishment is going to dominate the headlines in the top 10. NFL.com/Big Apple Draft. Be sure to check out my mock draft as well, which comes out today. And I'll be with you on Path to the Draft each and every day up until the first round kicks off on Thursday, every day, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Judy, this has been fun. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good luck on your mock.
All right. Thank you. It'll be the first universally accepted and applauded mock draft in the history of mock drafts.